And I was talking with one of my medicine teachers. I chose to work with mushrooms because this and this and that. And then she looks at me with a twinkle in her eyes and she says, "What makes you think that you chose the topic?" Until that moment, I was being very Western. For I am the one choosing. My ego is the one. I'm the one in control, right? I'm the captain of the ship. And now I think that the mushrooms had been calling me for a long time.
Welcome to Psychedelic Source, where wisdom meets practice in the evolving landscape of psychedelic medicine. I'm your host, Dr. Sandra Dreisbach, and I'm here to help you navigate the complex intersection of ethics, business, and personal growth in a psychedelic space. Whether you're a practitioner, therapist, entrepreneur, or simply curious about this transformative field, you've found your source for authentic dialogue, practical resources, and community connection. In each episode, we'll dive deep into the stories, strategies, and ethical considerations that matter most to our growing ecosystem. Let's tap in to our inner source of wisdom and explore what it means to build a sustainable and ethical psychedelic future together.
The information shared on this podcast, our website, and other platforms may be triggering for some viewers and readers and is for informational, educational, and entertainment purposes only. It is not a substitute for professional medical, legal, or therapeutic advice. While we explore topics related to altered states of consciousness, we do not endorse or encourage illegal activities or substance use. Always research your local laws and consult qualified professionals for guidance. The content provided is, as is, and we are not liable for any actions taken based on the information shared. Stay supported and informed, act responsibly, and enjoy the podcast.
In this episode, we have an opportunity to take a look at training and education in psychedelics with Sergio Rodriguez-Castillo, who's both an MFT and a PhD. He has over 18 years' experience in sacred medicines. He holds a Mexican JD, a UK LLM, and practiced law for 12 years. He's trained in psychospirituality and in India and at the Siddhama Institute, Osho's Ashram, and the Ramakrishna Mission, and apprenticed with Mazatec Curandera for over 10 years. He has a master's degree in integral counseling and East-West psychology, and a PhD focusing on developing psychedelic-assisted therapist training blueprint, which is part of what you'll hear us talk about today. He's been a core faculty at CIIS, and you'll get to hear from both of us some of the perspectives on these training and education programs, but particularly about his research and about his own personal journey in working with medicine, both in terms of traditional settings, like with the Mazatec, as well as in modern mindsets, such as what he teaches himself at CIIS. So I hope you'll enjoy this episode. Let's explore a little bit about psychedelic training and education and learn more about Sergio. Well, welcome, Sergio. It is so wonderful to have you here on Psychedelic Source. Even though I've given a bit of a background, it'd be great for you to tell a little bit about, who are you, what do you do, what do you not do, in terms of the psychedelic space.
Sure. Sandra, welcome. Welcome. Happy to be here. Really, really happy to be here. It took us a while to figure this out, but we did, and I'm very happy.
It did.
We did. We
Fate is
figured it out.
finally on our side.
We persevered. So what else should I say about me? You said already a lot. So I'm a psychotherapist in private practice, but just to add, my involvement with the medicine goes over 20 years ago. And it's interesting because even though I was originally, I'm originally from Mexico. I practice in California, but I'm originally from Mexico. But it took me a long way around until I found the medicine finally here in the US. So my first connection with the medicine was in the US. I was trained to work in the US. I started with my own work, and then I was trained to do the work here in the US. Back then it was underground. And then eventually I retraced my steps back to Mexico, and I got in touch with a Mexican healer, and I was her apprentice for 10 years. So it was really beautiful. It was kind of I joke with the medicine, who's writing the script, right? I'm a Mexican. I had to come to the US to find my way back to Mexico, but it had to be that way. I hold the medicine. You hear me say medicine when referred to psychedelics to make that distinction, right? Like, even though I have nothing against the recreational use, there's something about the healing value of the medicine. So when I refer to psychedelics, I often refer to the medicine because that's the word that I see, right?
Since you brought up the issue of using the term medicine, some people don't feel we should use the word medicine. And so what are your thoughts and feelings about, you know, is it psychedelic medicine? Is it how do you come to your relationship with psychedelics and plant medicine? Why do you use that term versus some other term?
Yes, yes, yes. And it's a little bit like we use the term plant medicine because it has this potential for healing, right? And again, I don't want to be kind of a holier than thou in the way that I say it. I think that psychedelics are so broad that they can be used for recreational, it can be used for creativity, they can be used for visionary, it can be used for healing, right? In my particular domain and practice, part of it because I'm a psychotherapist and part of it because that has been my path, I see psychedelics as medicine. And in that way, perhaps a little closer than what the traditions would say, right? For the traditions, they're plant medicines, right? They're plant allies, and they're used for healing and growth purposes. So that is to me the main essence of what psychedelics do to us is healing, helping us heal, helping us grow, and that's why I use the word medicine, right? To emphasize that aspect that the way I hold it is for healing and grow purposes.
And I love that you mentioned both not just healing, but also for growth, because the sort of Western assumption is that if you're using the word medicine, you are strictly meaning it in a healing sense, and that having support for growth or personal development or spiritual development or visioning, like you were mentioning, isn't a part of what a medicine relationship does, or let alone the idea of a plant ally.
I hear that, and I understand that most people, if they take paracetamol, they don't thinking about growth, right? They're thinking about healing, and that's why is I don't use the word medication. I use the word medicine, which I believe is has a broader aspect to it, and for me, is something. It would be dangerous for us to limit what the spirits of the medicines can do, right? Whether it's the peyote, the ayahuasca, the holy mushrooms, whatever it is, it's broad. And who are we to decide? No, they can only be used for this. That's a very anthropocentric, human-centric perspective of the medicine as such. So I think it's almost uh, beyond debate that some people come from healing because anything can happen. Something happened in their life, something happened along the way, something bad happened to them, whatever it is, and they need healing. We all need healing in some ways, and some people come because they want to grow, because things they were lucky enough that things are more or less working. We can always work a little bit more healing, but we definitely all can use some growth, right? And when it comes to growth, as we know, the sky is the limit, and the more that we grow, the better. I mean, I would say that in some ways we came here to this life to, in grand part, to learn, in a big part to learn and expand our experience, right? And even those that believe in reincarnation, without going to whether it's one or the other, there's something about we keep expanding and we keep expanding, and then we have some ascended masters like a Buddha or a Jesus that have expanded to the levels that the medicine showed us this is possible. This is available to all of us as human, and that's where the healing and the growth can go hand in hand in many ways.
Yeah, and I think what you're aptly pointing out is a lot of the limitations of our perspective comes from how we've been trained to think about medicine, how we've been trained to think about growth or healing in the West, or even who counts in terms of who decides, right? That anthropocentric view, right? The human centered, like we're the ones taking all the action, we're the ones making all the decisions. The relationship with the plants themselves aren't having any consciousness. It would be the sort of traditional Western view, right? And that all the action of the relationship is from what we decide and what, um, but before we go any further or deeper into there, and I'm always willing to wax philosophical, um, I want to hear a little bit more about, you personally. Now, you said that you didn't have relationship until you came to the United States. So how did you receive, sort of your invitation, or how did you first come into relationship?
You know, there's a funny story. This is not exactly the origin story, but let me start there.
Okay.
Uh, I I'm a graduate from CIS, as you said. I've taught there for 18 years, and California Institute of Integral Studies, and I was doing a research project, not my PhD dissertation, but another research project during my PhD, and I chose the topic of working with mushrooms, right? And I was talking with one of my teachers, not my school teachers, but my medicine teachers. So, well, you know what? I chose to work with mushrooms. It was in that particular case. I chose to work with mushrooms because this and this and that. And then she looks at me with a twinkle in her eyes, and she says, "What makes you think that you chose the topic?" And it kind of blew my mind. I have to say, like, to until that moment, I have never thought. Again, I was being very Western. For I am the one choosing. My ego is the one. I'm the one in control, right? I'm the captain of the ship, and that was not the first time, but that felt like, yeah. And now I think that the mushrooms had been calling me for a long time. I was always interested in the topic. Back in Mexico, when I first found uh, interest in my way in theoretically was through the music of the Doors. Remember the
Oh,
Doors?
really? Yeah,
That
no, Jim
was
Morrison, The Doors. No, absolutely.
Jim Morrison. I was
Yeah.
reading a biography of Jim Morrison, and I say
Uh-huh.
about psychedelics, and then from there Aldon Huxley, and from there Maria Sabina, and say, oh, this is a Mexican thing. And then I was really interested in it, but I don't think I had the right friends, because psychedelics never crossed my path, no matter how hard I try. I clearly was not destined to find it back then. Probably I was too young and too. Uh, would I not appreciate their value back then. So it took me a long way. It took me becoming a lawyer, doing master's degree in the United Kingdom, getting disenchanted with practicing the law, going to India, and eventually coming to the United States when I ended up CIIS. And then I say, finally, I'm going to be the place where Ramdas, Stan Groff, Ralph Metzner, all these luminaries in the field of psychedelics. I am going to find my way into psychedelics here, and I couldn't. For my first semester, I was trying to find the way. I even went to the Golden Gate Park, where
Did you really?
I
Went to
really
the
I
Lawrence
really
Park. I had to go, yeah.
the homeless to the
Which
homeless.
for anyone listening is, like, infamous for, like, just being around, and people
Yes,
just, like, practically handing it to you.
I
Um,
I wanted to score some psychedelic, and I couldn't.
couldn't.
They thought I was an undercover cop. So
Right.
so eventually I figure out this clever way, and this is going to connect with my idea of training. So I talked with one of my teachers at CIS, and this is back in the early 2000. Uh, and I came up. The CIS used to have, I don't remember if they still have now. They have a scholarship for research in psychedelic, the Kransky Scholarship. So I very cleverly designed a research protocol, and I came to this professor I said, I want you to be my sponsor. I want to do a research study comparing holotropic breathwork and LSD. And I want to see how those experiences are different. And he looks at me and he says, Sergio, have you ever tried psychedelics? And I say, no. I say, maybe you should start there. And I say, I would love to, but I don't know
But
how
I
to get
haven't been able
there.
to.
And eventually he connected me with an underground therapist that was doing the work. So I learned to become a psychotherapist very almost at the same time that I was doing my own psychedelic healing. So it was kind of a very uh, together. Those two paths happened together in my case. So for me, from the very beginning, from my formation, actually, mental healing and emotional development was closely connected with how psychedelics could help into that realm, right?
And I love that story, and so I'm curious, and feel free, to decline
Yeah.
to state at any point in time, but, um, so did you have a guide for your first time? Where did
I
you get
did.
sat? You did,
I
okay.
did. Yeah, I did. Most of my work had been guided. And I mean, eventually, I start doing personal work, especially going to Mexico, going to Jamaica, and things like that. But
Yeah.
yeah, for my personal work and personal growth, it was guided work.
Wow. Yeah,
Yeah.
I mean, for me, that alone is a trip because, having grown up in the Silicon Valley, like, it was I joke that it was in the water here, but, like, it was very recreational in orientation, but I don't often get as many stories where people are coming from, like, they had that more supported experience, from a therapeutic lens from the get-go, and you literally were coming up with a research project, right? Like, I'm like, "Okay, I want a research project, I wanna compare holotropic breath work to LSD," and you hadn't even had an experience, right? Which, arguably, you don't necessarily need to have the experience to do the research, right? But,
Not to do
you
the
can make the
there's a
argument,
big
but I mean, like,
pressure. Yeah.
but that's not what you did, then you went and had the experience at the same time as you started doing your own research. And maybe we could take a quick turn here to talk about your own work. So so what is your current passion in psychedelic research and in teaching and practice?
So as you mentioned, I recently, about 6 months ago, I defended my dissertation. And my dissertation was on the development of a blueprint for training psychedelic guides. So training psychedelic guides to me is fundamental. And let me tell you a little bit about how I came to that.
Please.
I was teaching at CIIS, as I said, in the Interval Counseling Psychology program. And as you also know, CIIS has also a certificate in psychedelic research and training. I don't remember exactly what the name right now, but it's in research and practice and therapy or
Yeah,
something
and
like
I think I've heard recently that they expanded it out so that more people could actually be a part
that.
of
That's
it. Because I
correct.
know
Now
when
it's
I
also
looked into it, I couldn't even be considered because I was neither a therapist nor a minister.
yeah,
Um,
no,
they
they
they they
just
weren't accepting ethicists at the time.
there you go. Now probably you could do it
Maybe
right.
now I probably could.
But the thing is, I was at the time, I was a teacher, a professor in the Integral Counseling Psychology program. That is a program for licensing therapists to become a psychotherapist. And first, I got a lot of people coming through the program that had psychedelic experience. And I got a lot because people knew of my passion and my involvement in the field of psychedelics. I got a lot of these horror stories, of
Mm.
people that say, you know what, I did an ayahuasca circle and there was no integration, and I don't know what's right, real or what's wrong, or I did I did mushrooms and the guy did some things that I'm not sure. Going back to the ethics, I'm not sure. It felt weird then, and it feels weird now, and I'm feel uncomfortable. So a lot of horror stories coming from the students of the program. So
Yeah.
that was the first one. Then I start hearing that more and more people were getting into the Integral Counseling Psychologist ICP. That's the acronym ICP program, in order to then jump into the psychedelic certificate program. So a lot of people say the only reason why I'm doing this is because I want to do the psychedelic. And then, but then I started realizing that people were having experiences with so-called guides or sitters or whatever word you want to use, that they were not themselves well trained, and they were actually harming people. And I myself was involved in one community for a long time, and eventually the founders of that community were found to be harming also their followers. I don't know what's the right word. The people in their community. And again, I began to do some research and say this is everywhere, and you know this better than most. There's so much abuse, so much horrible things going on, that I said, how can I help this? And I thought, one way of helping is by developing a blueprint. And the reason for that was very simple. There's no real agreement on of what should a training program should be. There are some programs that are really comprehensive. There are programs that are three years long or more, and there are training programs that are three month and a half if you do it intensive.
Well,
Uh,
and in traditional settings, some go 30 years, right? You know, so
yeah,
it's not
well,
right.
yeah,
Like from the Western perspective of what counts as training versus other traditions or other practices, and it may not be a set date, right? It may be when. Well, okay, I believe you're ready now. Like you've received it, right? It's not because like you've done XYZ program,
it's not about
right?
credits. It's about experience and it's about
Right,
relationship with the medicine. But
right.
anyway, whether in both cases, it became clear to me that there were certain things that needed to be included in such a program. So what I did is that I spent, as everyone does for a PhD, I spent about 4 years researching. I reviewed 80 programs throughout the world that were teaching psychedelic guiding or psychedelic psychotherapy. Then I chose 16 that I thought were the very best according to certain criteria. You know how in the dissertation you need to write a lot about how you
Sure.
chose your sample and so on and so forth. From all of those, plus the literature, I kind of distill what I believe are the core, not competencies, but the core areas of knowledge that guides need to be trained on. And they're both. And what I found out is that most training programs are really good or acceptably good in the technical part. What are the psychedelics? How do they work in the brain? How do you prepare for someone? Integration is a little less emphasized, but most programs are good in the technical part. But I also realized that that's not the half of it. That's only a part of it. You also need to be doing your personal work because psychedelics are intense. And if the person does, that's why they do 30 years in the traditions, because if you haven't worked your own stuff, it's gonna show up in the journey. It's gonna show up in the experience. So most program, what I call the missing links, is the personal work on the one hand and the transpersonal understanding. The thing that psychedelics are, the lens in which the psychedelics came back to the West in this last iteration is, well, with MAPS wonderfully is doing or trying to accomplish, what is get it approved by FDA, right, as a medication, right? So is the Western medical paradigm, which is wonderful as far as it is, but psychedelics provide so much more. So at the very least, you need to have an understanding of the spiritual aspects of psychedelics. Otherwise, you're gonna fall short. You're not gonna understand what the medicine is trying to teach you if you're only thinking, "Oh, this is just for trauma. This is just for anxiety." No, this is for life. So I think I gave you a big
No,
answer.
I love this. No, I love this, and I love and we definitely bonded over your research and your dissertation because I think there's so many training programs out there now. There's not a lot of help or support for people to help, basically use their discernment for selecting them, or even knowing, even if they have gone through a training program, maybe even being under the delusion sometimes that they're actually ready. I would say on the whole, the people who I've met or worked with in programs that I've been a part of know that it's not adequate, right? And want better training or better practicum pieces than are what currently are provided. But then also obviously being limited by current legal options in the United States, even when they're part of a legal training program, right? But I'm curious. So, could you tell me a little bit more about the elements? I love that you brought up the spiritual element because I feel like that's kind of like one of the taboos that they don't want to touch in a training program. I mean, and I think I also would agree that integration is kind of integration light on the whole, that they're not training them to help people integrate their experiences. They're mainly focused on let's make sure you have the knowledge pieces that you have. Let's make sure you have the practical pieces or the legal structures that you need to abide by for this particular area, whether it be Oregon or Colorado, and I'm being very US centered. What other sort of pieces that you feel from your research, from your work, that are really essential that from your understanding, from your training, and from your experience?
Sure. So again, the first part, as I said, is the self exploration, the intraper. I like to divide it, as one of my teachers used to say, is the intrapersonal, the interpersonal, and the transpersonal.
Okay, let's
So
do that slower. So interpersonal, so you
intrapersonal,
between and other people.
no, intra is within
Intra
yourself.
is you within yourself.
Then it's
Inter is with
inter,
the other person.
yes, and transpersonal is between you and spirit.
Okay.
Spirit, God, the universe, mystery, whatever you want to call it, right? So again, in the intrapersonal is where you work about your own stuff, your own childhood wounding, your own shadow, all the stuff that you need to explore. That psychotherapists know this very well, and ethicists know this very well, because this is the stuff that get you in trouble, right?
Absolutely.
That you need to be admired, you need to be liked, you need your sexual desires or repressions, right? Your fears, your anger, all of that stuff. Well, you need to work it in your own self first. We never end, as I said. Healing and growth is forever, right? But you need to be reasonably well put together, and you need to be first deconstructed and then reconstructed, doing a whole bunch of things, from psychotherapy, journaling, psychedelic work for sure, holotropic breathwork, meditation, whole a big array of things that you need to do in order to really understand who are you, understand your strengths, and understand your weaknesses, so you don't transfer them to the client and harm the client, or worse, you use the client as the
To get
vehicle
your
to
own needs met. Right,
get
exactly.
and as you know, that happens a lot.
A lot.
So that's the intrapersonal. The interpersonal is the broadest, and like I said, this is where the interpersonal is broader, but it includes all the technicalities, and it also includes all the legal. It also includes the ethical, but as I assume you agree with me, but you let me know, the ethical doesn't make sense really if you haven't done the intrapersonal,
Well
because
well,
then
for
there's
me,
just a
it's
bunch of
it's
rules.
intertwined, at least for me personally, like, that you cannot, hold full ethical space if you have not done that personal ethical work yourself. It's the
Yes,
same sort of concept, right? Like,
yes,
if you don't know what you personally value, and you don't know what you're holding in integrity for yourself, you're certainly not gonna help someone else in an aligned way to help them align and get clarity on their own values or their own meaning or their own purpose, or be able to, independent of whether or not you're sort of doing the sort of Hippocratic do no harm sort of thing,
yeah,
in principle, in principle.
in
Yeah, in
principle, but
principle.
that's the problem, and that's the whole idea of inner ethics that I love is so important, because if you don't do the inner work, I love the idea of intertwine. If you don't know the inner work, then the ethical, the moral stuff is just a bunch of rules. And every single, I'm gonna move from guides to psychotherapy. Every single psychotherapist that had sex with their clients knew that it was wrong.
Mm.
Every single one. There's no way that you can become a psychotherapy without knowing that you shouldn't have sex with your client. There's even the blue pamphlet that tells you therapy does never involve having sex with your client, at least here in California or anywhere. But the blue pamphlet,
Anywhere yeah, at least in terms of, like, what you're agreeing to, right?
exactly. But the problem is that if your personal stuff is not more or less in order, then you can trick yourself to believe, well, maybe in this case it would be okay. And when you use psychedelics that kind of by their very nature bend the rules, it becomes even so more tempting to say, well, the rules don't apply in the psychedelics. We teach
Well, the
totally wrong.
boundaries, that literally is a boundary dissolver, right?
It's a
You know?
Yeah, but what I tell students is it's a boundary dissolver, yes, but the boundaries of the frame that that
That
the
you're
guide is
holding. If
holding
you're holding the space,
have
you're
to
holding
be,
the container.
yes, that those boundaries stay,
That's right.
because
Absolutely.
even if they are dissolved in the psychedelic space, once you come back to this reality, that's when people say, "Oh my God, what happened here?" So anyway, the interpersonal is all that aspect that has to do with all these different aspects of what medicine to use, how often to use it, should you use music or not, all those things that you discussed. The relationship with the medicines, the chemical compounds versus the plant medicine. This is a place, by the way, where we can take learn not take learn from what the traditions know about how to hold these relationally,
And
because
let's go to that, because you said you went from literally a non-traditional Western introduction to psychedelics and working with psychedelics, even though, like, obviously in a therapeutic sense, to then returning to Mexico, of your homeland, and getting connected to traditional medicine keepers. Could you talk a little bit about that and your experience that and how that may have shifted for you?
oh, it shifts significantly, because something that I learned is that for the traditions, and not just in my case, I wasn't, and I'm still, my original teacher passed away. She transitioned, whatever you want to call it. She was my teacher for 10 years, but now I'm a student of another Mazatec teacher. So my relationship has been with the Mazatec, the
Tradition.
Maria Sabina tradition. And it's something that they teach you, but it's the same thing with the ayahuasca tradition. It's the same thing with the peyote and all the tradition. It's about the relationships, right? As I think the Lakota said, all my relationships. It's
All my
all about
relations.
the relationship. So I tell people, it's not about taking mushrooms, right? It's about relating to the mushrooms. Some another teacher told me once, you should never ask yourself what are the mushrooms, but who are the mushrooms? Because you need to establish a relationship with them, and you need to respect them. And see, in some ways, it is like you go to meet a guru. You want to be in relationship with your guru. You just go and take something from the guru. You actually stay in relationship, and the more that you deepen their relationship, the more that you get from that relation. So that was the main thing. Well, not the only thing, but the main thing that I got from the tradition is precisely that. It's all relationship. It's all balance. Psychopathology is an unbalance. Something's out of whack, and you need to find the balance. You need to, if you're going to take something from Mother Nature, give something back. Be of service, right? Respect the spirit world. I ask when I train guides, I tell them that one of the first questions that the mushrooms, the holy children, as they sometimes called, the little ones that sprout from the ground, are called in the Mazatec tradition, that the first question that the mushrooms are going to ask you is, what type of healer do you want to be? And I ask that question to therapists. Say, don't listen that as an anthropologist. Oh, that's so interesting. No, is it as existentially? The mushrooms are asking me, what type of healer do I want to be? And if you think about it, that implies the ethical aspects, that imply the
Absolutely.
respect, that imply, am I going to be the best version of myself? Or am I just going to be a okay version of myself? And hopefully you want to be the best that you can be, right? And you understand the respect for nature, and you understand that there is more than one reality, and we need to honor those. How do you understand those reality as energies within your psyche, or energies surroundings, or different levels, upper realm, middle realm, lower realm? It doesn't matter that much, as long as you remain humble and aware to the fact that there are more than one realms, that this realm, the physical realm, is not the only one, and we need to learn to be in relationship with these other realms. So that's what the traditions have taught me. I mean, a whole bunch of little things and
No,
ceremonial
there's
things.
so much. I mean, I wouldn't reasonably expect you to convey all of a tradition, let alone, I wouldn't expect you to represent a tradition either,
Yes,
with all due respect.
of
Um,
course.
yeah, but it is worth mentioning because, there's a lot more conversation about the Mazatec tradition than there are other traditions, at least in terms of when it comes to the mushroom and Maria Sabina and what happened to her and in relationship to us, meaning, in the Western way and how we've come stumbling, I would say, at the very least, into relationship with the mushroom. Uh, what since you did bring up ethics, wh- where do you make your peace in reciprocity or in relationship, as someone who is Mexican from Mexico, but having that Western training and then returning to the origins of your own culture in relationship to at least one cultural tradition, right? How has that journey been for you, for your personal relationship?
You ask very good questions, Sandra. That is an ongoing conversation, right? Because you are right. I talk about the Mazatec tradition because I've studied for many years, and I'm not a Mazatec, and I would never ever presume that I understand the Mazatec or I understand the relationships that they have with the mushrooms. I can be aspirational, but it'll never be my tradition. So for me, it has been a long process of understanding what it means to honor a tradition and what it means to take from that tradition. Right. To give you one example, I take groups to Mexico every year, so they have experience with Mazatec elders on working with the medicine the way they work. And I make the point that say, this is not a retreat with a Mazatec healer. We're actually going to go there and we're going to spend time learning their culture. We actually take them to museums. I understand the culture first. Then we go there and we spend with there a few days. And after that, we are in service. We say, okay, what does the community needs? And we've painted walls and we have clean roads and we have planted trees. We ask them, what do you need in this term of I mean, and it's completely unbalanced, right? There's no way if how many trees do I need to plant in order to be uh, at pair with what the mushrooms are giving me? I mean, a hundred forests, right? So it's never enough.
Well,
But
and
there's
and it's
something
and it's
about
not a one and
creating.
done affair, right? As we've already talked about, right? It's
Yes.
it's it's about, at least for me, about, building that relationship and continuing with that relationship, just like you and I. You know, we meet, we get to know each other, we try and keep it in balance, and there'll be times where it'll be out of balance, and then you recognize it and you feed the relationship and support it and nurture it as its own being.
Yeah,
You
that's what
know,
a relationship is.
yeah, that's what
Exactly.
a relationship is. Or
Yes.
or you with your spouse, or you with, the plants, and it changes and new relationships come in. And it's already part of, your heart community, your spirit community, right? And at least for me, I don't know about you, and we haven't delved too much in the spiritual thing, but sometimes like I get surprised by one that's coming in. I'm like, oh, okay. Apparently now I'm having a relationship with the cougar. Okay, great. You
Yeah. Yes. 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 And thank you for bringing that up because we can get lost in the realms, right? So the interpersonal, and let me just talk briefly about the
Yeah, let's go into the
transpersonal,
transpersonal.
because again, I believe one of the concerns that I've seen is that the medicines are being brought back as medications,
Right.
right? And they're thinking, how can we get FDA approval to use this for trauma, right? And that makes sense as long as we understand that that's just the proverbial tip of the iceberg, right? The mushrooms, the ayahuasca, even the MDMA and the synthetics, LSD, they bring so much more. And it's important that each one of us, as we are stepping into this realm, first, just as we did with the intrapersonal, first develop our own relational to spirit. And what does that mean? That's really for you to define, right? Is some like to think of a personal divine, some like to think of an impersonal divine, some like to think of as nature. Some people think about spirit animals, some people talk about angels, some people talk about whatever like
Or
spirits
all the above.
of all of the above. And I believe that, again, a teacher of mine used to say that, some people believe, mistakenly, he would say, that spirit or God, to use one word, simple, God is like the ocean, and we're at the beach connected with the ocean. And what he used to say is, no, the ocean has many beaches and no one is better than another one. So some people may be in Acapulco, right? And some people may be in Miami Beach. And it's the same ocean. It's the same ocean. We are connecting with one expression of the divine, and the expressions of the divine are infinite. And the medicine teaches you, as you say. Sometimes I had experience with medicine that are easy to understand from a Buddhist lens. And I see the bodhisattvas, and I see the, or like in Buddhist tankas, right? I see the Buddha, and then in the eyes of the Buddha there's another Buddha, and then in the eyes of the Buddha there's another Buddha. Sometimes it's been very Hindu. I understand the vibration of Om. Sometimes a buffalo appears in my dreams. Oh, like you said with the jaguar, of the cougar, right?
Yes.
Oh, this is a spirit animal. I need to honor the spirit animal. Sometimes it has been Jesus Christ, for that matter. So there's something about understanding that they are all valid expressions of connection with the divine. And we need to understand, not necessarily fully all of them, but at least be familiar with the world of spirit, to understand whatever the client presents to us, not to dismiss it. Oh, that's just an hallucination, right? Oh, that's just childhood stuff. No, there are spiritual components, and leaving that outside of the understanding of the medicine, or being afraid. I tell students, we have to take spirit seriously,
Well, that's for
because
sure.
invited or not invited, spirit is always present. So, and the medicine shows you that, right? Even if you come in, how many people said, I want to work with my anxiety or my depression, and boom, they have a mystical experience, right? Because it's unpredictable, because it was always there. And we need to be willing to be conversational about it, and have respect for these different aspects, and willingness to engage with the client in those different aspects. And that's hard, because if you think about it, these two, well, all of them, but both the interpersonal and the transpersonal are very, what is the word, that you cannot control them. You don't know what you're going to find. And training programs don't like that. They like to keep
Well,
it neat.
and maybe we should switch back into the training programs again, because you did do the research on that. What do you feel is like the number one thing, if there could be, like, the top things that training programs could do now to improve their programs? What would you tell them based on your work?
Well, it's kind of a tricky question to answer, because training programs are different, right? I think that
Well,
what needs to be,
absolutely. No. But
what,
but you
what I
studied, like, you picked a selection, you found particular gaps, like, what were the major gaps?
sure. So first, the idea of the blueprint was to create a basic template, to say these 15 areas are the ones that need to be covered. Now, who am I? I'm just the guy who did his dissertation, right? So nobody's gonna say, "Oh, we're gonna use the Sergio Rodriguez template to our program." That doesn't sell.
Maybe they will, I don't know.
Maybe I will. Who knows? But
We
no,
should at least
but I was
consult
very
it.
aware. I was not being messianic in my say. I'm just, this is my contribution. But what I hope that is going to happen is that a program is going to look at it, and is going to say, okay, from this, I need another hand to make the 15. From these 15 categories, our program is geared towards doctor, let's say. Okay, then these are the ones that we know that we need to cover, and maybe these other five we're not going to cover, or we're just going to add them as optional topics or whatever. But then people are going to know, okay, if you're a physician and you're interested in the brain and in research and its stuff, then you know that that's your program, right? That we can have a university. By the way, universities are really good in dealing with the, not surprisingly, although that may be changing now, with the diversity and inclusion aspect of the program, with the recognition and the acknowledgement of the traditions. So if you know in your soul that you're not so much interested in how the brain works, yeah, it's good for you to know that there's such thing called neurotransmitters and that stuff. but you're really interested in the traditions, you're really interested in the ceremony, and the drum, and the candles, and the spirit world, and all of that, then another program may say, you know what, from these 15 categories, we're going to choose that, and our program is going to have emphasis on this. So just like any other profession, you users, potential clients, students are going to be able to decide where is how do I feel called by the medicine? In which direction do I want to go? And then there may be a few programs out there that say we want to be integral. We want to cover all the aspects of it. We want to be the best program out there. And then because there is this blueprint, they'll know, at least they know what they need to cover. And if they choose to leave something out, at least they know, and hopefully they make an informed decision why they're leaving that out, right? As opposed to, oops, we didn't think that that was important.
As much as we might give smack to traditional university systems, one thing that, is prevalent is that there'll be a core curriculum, core education piece that everyone, needs to get satisfied, and then you can focus on your specialization. And at least for me, as I think about, like we're still very much trying to figure out what is that core curriculum piece, let alone, but we're not necessarily being great about supporting that special area or calling on which we're being directed towards. Like if you're called towards working with the mushroom, or you're called to work more with integrating experiences, whatever it is, or with a particular traditions where maybe there's multiple, or ones that are not psychedelic per se, but involve like dietas and other plant allies that are part of the relationship and the development. Um,
Yeah.
and there's sort of this more than an East meets West, or global North meets global South sort of aspect, but I think that's definitely happening. I think a bridging of the ways is going to be part of what happens with these training programs. But that's part of my perspective from my point of view.
I agree with you. I agree with you. And I hope one of my community, no, my dissertation committee members was Bill Richards. We had
Oh,
long
yeah.
conversations about if this go the way we hope that it's going to go, then we're not going to have, as I was suggesting, not just one training program. There will be training program for theologians that are particularly interested in the spiritual aspect of it, just as there will be perhaps programs for people that are more interested in the creative aspects of psychedelic, right, of artists and things like that. Just as right now we have some programs that are more geared towards researchers, and there are some programs that are more geared towards clinicians, right? That is just the beginning. We have the big limitation that because it's illegal, the programs out there, except if you are in Oregon or Colorado, right, at this point,
At
or
this
if you're
point,
planning to go to
another
Jamaica or
country or the Netherlands,
the
or
Netherlands, you are being trained to do something that is not yet allowed, and that's problematic, right? I sometimes wonder if the programs are not aware that there is kind of a say like a nudge, a wink wink nudge that probably you're gonna have to do this illegal before it gets legalized. And I'm a little worried about when I see all these programs. Of course, everybody hope that MAPS, MDMA was going to be approved a few months ago. So everybody was going to be a psychedelic therapy right now because it is such a big demand. But that didn't happen. And that's 2 years away at the very least, right? I
or,
don't know.
or or you have the opposite problem, like in Australia, right? They actually allowed MDMA, and so and they don't have enough people trained.
That's it. That is the problem. I'm also seeing something new, and this is a big topic, Sandra. We may not want to get into the details of that,
It's
but
okay. Yeah, no,
uh,
we have to de-academize ourselves a little bit.
yeah, I've also seen programs that the what's the word, sprouting, I guess, of
Yeah,
programs more focused on the spiritual aspect of it. They're called psychedelic churches, and I say that this is a big topic because there are some so-called psychedelic churches that are nothing but a dispensary with
yeah,
the
absolutely
trappings of
true.
church, right?
Yeah,
But I've
absolutely true.
also seen cases Case in point, the Congregation for Sacred Practice here in the Bay Area, that is really trying to hold psychedelics as sacraments. And then I see, that's a really interesting aspect of it, because that is really focusing on the transpersonal. Now the question is, how much are they dealing with the interpersonal, the psychological aspect of it? That's why, in some ways, a psychedelic guide, and that's why training and education is so important for me, is almost called to be kind of a superhero or super shiro, because they need to learn, besides doing their own work, they need to be versed in so many different topics:
It's absolutely
psychological,
true. I mean, as I
spiritual,
think about how I've
mental.
tried to build my own training program for myself, like you're pretty much left on your own to be in integrity, at least in my humble perspective, to make sure you're doing the work that you need to do and receiving the training you need to have in order to be able to do it responsibly. But most of the programs, I mean, they're doing the best that they can, right? And often they have limited resources, and there already are a lot of them are very expensive, right? So they're cost prohibitive, and there's no job necessarily at the other end of the rainbow right now,
That's
except for
correct.
maybe underground work or working in other countries, perhaps, more so than here in the States. But what advice would you give someone who's looking to try and have training and be in a program? What kind of advice would you give them? Someone who's new, who's curious.
Yeah, a few things. First, do your homework, right? There are tons of different programs out there, as you mentioned. Like I said, when I did my research, I researched 80, and I'm pretty sure that was about how much there was available back then. But programs pop up and then disappear, and then others come up, and then they change names. So there's a lot happening. So the first thing is, do your homework, check a few programs, not just because you found one is, oh, this is it. Compare the programs. If you can, my dissertation is available freely online, and I'll send you the link. So perhaps you can make it
Yeah, no,
available
let's
to
definitely
PC
do that.
Center.
Yeah.
Uh, and that was one of the ideas of creating the blueprint. One was to help organization, and the other was for potential practitioner or applicants to read the template and say, okay, this program is lacking in this and this and this, therefore this is not good for me. Oh, this one seems to be to cover all of them. So that was the idea. So do their homework, compare a few programs. It's in some ways it's the same as choosing a university for your master's degree or whatever it is, right? Do your homework. If you can, talk with some practitioners, that are graduate from that program, and then see which one resonates with you. If it was a university, right? People go and visit the university and walk around the campus to see, do I feel like I could study here? That's just not the case here. But there's something about really resonating with what is the ethos of each program, and to feel if this is what your own understanding is of what psychedelic is. And ask yourself the question: what type of guide, what type of psychedelic psychotherapist or therapist do I want to be?
I think that's really good advice. And I can see even in your own development, right? You chose a program, but then you also are supplementing it through traditional ways. What is calling you now in terms of, where you finished the dissertation, you're still teaching it, like, thank goodness. I know that feeling. um what's exciting you now in your work?
What is exciting me? It's one of those things. After you finish the dissertation, after I finished my dissertation, I should said, a part of that was like, huh, what's next? I was one of those crazy academicians or whatever that I got my law degree, and they get a master in law in the United Kingdom. Then I did two more master's degrees in CIS, and eventually I did a PhD. Crazy.
I'm
So
with you. I technically have 2 master's degree, but I don't tell people that because, like, and then I got the PhD. I'm like, "Oh, no."
I'm not saying that to brag. I'm actually saying it the other way around, but because
No,
like
no, I wish it was
I was
shorter
not
myself, yeah.
clear, I was not clear what to do next. So right now I'm thinking, what do I want to do? And to be honest with you, I do have an answer for that. It's kind of a woo answer, but this is the answer. I've been thinking, okay, what is the teaching that the medicine? What is the teaching of the medicine? What is and
Yeah,
in my
what
mind,
kind of healer are you?
what kind of healer I'm? And that's where I'm going with this. You got it. So I think that the medicine teaches us, and they can teach us many, many, many things. But if I have to distill it to one thing, is like you are okay just the way you are. You are loved as you are, and everything is unfolding as it should. The phrase of the Desiderata that I like the most. So in some ways, my hope is that whatever I do, whether it's psychotherapy or taking groups to Mexico or facilitating groups in Jamaica, I am conveying that to the people. You are fine just the way you are. You are loved beyond belief, and things are unfolding exactly as they should.
That's so
So my
beautiful.
my hope is to convey that to, however, I still don't know that. I'm trusting the process, as we say, to try to find where the river is gonna take me. It took me to you to talk with you today, and I don't know, but there's something about that.
I think that's really a beautiful note to end on.
Hmm.
So, I mean, it's truly, thank you. And I think everything is working out beautifully for us and for everyone. And in that element of like trusting the process or allowing whatever to arise. And reminds me actually of Joseph Campbell talking about, your path and following your bliss. Um, and that, when you follow that path, you're looking for Sat Chit Ananda, right? And he's like, I don't know if my being's perfect being. I don't know if my consciousness is the right consciousness, but I know what my bliss is. And that you'll find that you look down and you are on the right path all along.
And that's important, especially without getting into that, because that's
No,
another
no.
conversation. At some level, we're living very difficult times. Very, very difficult. Are they harder than others? I don't know. I didn't live through any of the wars.
That
I
you know of.
imagine that those were more scary than this one, or the Cold War. But we are living different and painful times. But the medicine keeps reminding us everything is unfolding as it should. It may not be seen that way, may don't look like way right now, but everything is unfolding as it should. As the, I think John Lennon, or this famous movie, right? Marigold Hotel. Everything will work out at the end, and if it doesn't, but if it's not working out, it
It's
is
not
not.
the end.
Yes.
So this isn't the end for us, Sergio. I know, and I've always really enjoyed talking with you in our conversations that we've had so far, and I'm so grateful for your work and research and what you've done to kind of highlight the issues in training and education, and I'm just really inspired by your story. So thank you again for taking the time to meet with me, and to share some of your journey, both inside and with transpersonal and with others.
And thank you to you, Sandra. I enjoy our conversations very much, and I value what you're doing so much,
Oh, thank
because
you.
it is important to keep bringing back ethics into the work. We cannot avoid that, and you're doing a fantastic and very, very important key work into the field.
Oh,
So
thank you.
I'm
You're
very
both.
grateful.
Thank you. Much love. Thank you for joining me on Psychedelic Source. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe wherever you get your podcast and share with others in our community. And if you're a psychedelic practitioner, therapist, or coach looking to identify blind spots in your practice or determine next steps for moving it forward, take the first step by visiting psychedelicsourcepodcast.com. Until next time, remember, start low, go slow, and stay connected to your source.